morning, everybody. Hello. It's been a minute. I've been busy working. It is the summer season, which is the busiest time of work for me. So apologies. I've not been around much over the last week, but I have been trying to keep you all up to date with what's been going on through my community posts on my YouTube channel. And as many of you may know, Scientology applied for a protest ban last year, and we have been under immense pressure. The council observed our protest outside the IES event, the big international gathering that Scientology holds at its UK headquarters in October. And finally, we are almost at the final hurdle. The Mid-Sussex District Council have released their report, which suggests that elected council members reject Scientology's application for a protest ban. That vote will take place on Monday at Mid-Sussex District Council's offices in Haywards Heath. And of course, I will be there if you are around and would like to attend too. It would be great to have you along. You do need to register before attending to make sure you get a space in the public viewing gallery, but all the documents have now finally been released, which means I can share with you guys what's been going on over these last 10 months and how I have been fighting our corner and trying to defend our right to protest and our freedom of speech. And I thought it'd be fun to share some of the documents with you that I haven't been able to share up until this point. But first, let's say hello to everyone in the chat. We have SP Crusader Leanie here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live chat. Please remember to hit that like button on your way in. Absolutely. Mark the Dorset SP is here. Hello, evening, Alex. One and all. Good evening. Petrie Nar is here. Sue Denim, thank you so much for joining. Lots of regular faces in the chat. So this one, we're going to get into the weeds a little bit. The news is that the Mid-Sussex District Council are recommending that Scientology's application for a protest ban is denied, is rejected. The official, as I said, the official decision will be taking place on Monday. But let's get into the weeds and show some of these documents so you can get a glimpse into what's been going on. Obviously, there has been a lot of press around this as well. So this is the Sussex Express. This came out yesterday. This is a news article. Calls from Church Scientology for order to ban protests outside of Sussex HQ recommended for refusal. Calls from the Church of Scientology for an order to ban protests outside its East Grinstead headquarters have been recommended for refusal. Mid-Sussex District Council's cabinet is due to make a decision on Monday about whether to put a public spaces protection order in place on St Hill Road and West Hoathly Road. The church made the request for a PSPO in July 2024, saying protests outside its premises had a detrimental effect on the quality of life of people living nearby, posed a risk to public safety, and caused harassment, disturbance, and alarm to those attending the church. But unfortunately, the council's report actually makes it clear that the disruption to the local community and the road safety issues are all Scientology's fault and not because of us protesters. So let's have a look at the documents themselves. First, this is so as part of this process, there's been a lot of emails flying back and forth. There are actually over 500 pages of evidence that have been supplied over the last 10 months. We're not going to look at every single page of every single document. I'm just going to show you some highlights. If you want to read through all of the documents, the link is in the description, and you can go to the Mid-Sussex District Council website and view them for yourself. But as part of this process, the Mid-Sussex District Council met with us protesters a few months ago. I think it was in April. They met with us. We discussed our concerns. They asked lots of questions. And 2 weeks later, they then met with Scientology representatives. I'm just going to put someone in timeout because you need to stay on topic in the chat here. So this here is the minutes from the meeting that the council held with the church, which again, I was not privy to until it was published. So the meeting that the council had with the church took place on the 28th of April. Obviously, I'm not going to read every single word. There were 7 attendees. That means 7 representatives for the church. And this was where they asked lots of questions. I'm going to skip through a lot and point out some key points. So one of the questions the council asked: are you willing to work with West Sussex County Council highways officers to identify alternative access routes for attendees that reduces foot traffic along St Hill Road, for example, by providing a pedestrian access closer to drop-off points such as the sports club or the rugby club? And Scientology's response: to this was, well, the council asked, would additional car parking spaces on site help reduce traffic along Saint Hill Road? Because one of the issues that the council had was that the number of people, the sheer thousands that were attending Scientology's event, is what causes a lot of road traffic issues and road safety issues. So the council were asking, would you consider putting in additional parking spaces so that there's less road congestion? And Scientology's response was, they confirmed that it would consider putting in car parking spaces, and they were looking to extend the car park in the church grounds. However, planning permission was required, and the preparation for a planning permission application was underway. So we can look forward to that. They currently have approximately 140 or 160 parking spaces. The additional car park would increase the parking spaces to 1,100 in total. So the reason I wanted to point that out was because it's very interesting. Scientology claims to be the fastest growing religion on planet Earth, with thousands of followers around the world. In fact, hundreds of thousands in the UK is what they claim. Now, St. Hill is the UK headquarters. It is supposed to be the biggest, busiest org in the country. And the fact that they've admitted they only have 140 parking spaces just gives you an idea of how not busy this place is and how few Scientologists there are. And the fact that they're only looking to put in place 1,000 additional parking spaces just goes to show how small this event really is. Scientology claim they have 10,000 attendees at this event. Their premises license only allows up to 7,000 people. And actually, when you do the maths on the tent, the marquee that they put up, the actual capacity is probably more like 3,000. And here they're saying that they're only going to put in 1,000 car parking spaces, which all goes to show that Scientology like to inflate their stats and that, in fact, only about 1,000 people go to this event. So I thought that was interesting because this is an admission on Scientology's part of just how small their organization is. Scrolling on. Another question. Are you willing to discuss with West Sussex County Council and Sussex Police options for improving road safety, such as providing temporary lighting inside your grounds that will light the road, improving parking inside St. Hill Manor to avoid traffic build-up at the entrance, and limiting visitors to the church interacting with protesters. 3, allowing pedestrian access into St. Hill Manor much closer to the sports club and rugby club car parks, thus reducing the interaction of visitors with protesters. And Scientology's response. Regarding temporary lighting, attendee 1 noted the church had provided lighting at past events. However, they will not provide it for future events as they do not want to encourage or draw attention to the protesters. He noted, however, the entrance was concealed and lighting would help. However, they did not want to encourage protesters or upset guests as a consequence. The council reminded attendees of road and pedestrian safety being a priority for Mid-Sussex District Council. He stated in previous years a banner with the entrance directions had been in place opposite the St. Hill Manor entrance. However, this had been removed at the request of West Sussex County Council. They would be willing to have a banner in place to try and prevent confusion about where attendees should be going. Now, this is a prime example of Scientology using deflection and distraction to try and avoid answering the question. The council here are saying that by providing lighting, you make the event safer for everybody, not just protesters, but for people attending your event. Would you consider doing that? And their response was, no, we're not going to do that because it allows people to see the protesters. How petty is that? Grow up, Scientology. That's just childish. They say that they would rather not put lights up because it allows protesters to be seen. They'd rather not do that than think about people's safety, right? In all my meetings with the council, I made it very clear that safety is our #1 priority as a protest group. That's why we wear high-vis jackets. That's why we bring our own lighting. And the church here are admitting that they don't care about safety. In fact, what they care about is making sure us protesters aren't seen or heard. And the council pushed them for that. And their response was to say, well, we had a banner. How does a banner help? A banner might make it clearer, yes, where the entrance is, but that's not going to improve visibility. It's not going to make the country lane less dark. The problem is it's a country lane with no lighting. Therefore, it's unsafe for people to be walking in the road, which is what they did to attend the event. And this is just an example of how petty Scientology really are. They went on to say a hedge had also been planted at the request of the police opposite the entrance to the church to discourage use of the area. This conflicts with advice from West Sussex County Council regarding the hedge. However, the church are happy to engage with West Sussex County Council to improve the ongoing issues. Lucy Corrie, who's the Assistant Director of the Council, said that West Sussex County Council are willing to discuss using alternative entrances. However, the church does not think this would solve road safety issues. So what they're saying here is they're admitting that the hedge they planted opposite the entrance was to reduce areas available for protesters. Again, it's just petty. They talk about the temporary planters that they put in place to obstruct us, but it starts to get really fun here. Are you prepared to cease or relocate playing loud music, for example, bagpipes, directly next to protest areas, or limit the time the music is played? Note, attendee 1, i.e. the church, explained that bagpipe theme music was an integral part of the annual event, noting it was slightly intrusive, but not invasive to residents, and they had not received any complaints from residents. He did not think the music caused confusion or had an impact on the traffic or providing directions to guests or visitors. Lucy Corrie asked if the police had asked the church to reduce the level of the music, and the church said there was no record of this. The church would be happy to negotiate with police the level of noise of the music, but not to facilitate the protesters. Again, grow up. What they're saying is that they played loud bagpipe music, that the police asked them to turn it down, but there was no record of this. That's an acceptable truth in Scientology terms because, yeah, perhaps there isn't a record in Scientology's possession of the police asking them to turn the music down. But there is a record on my live stream, there is a record in the council observers' documents, and there is a record on the police systems. So when they got called out for their acceptable truth, the church backed down and they said, okay, well, yeah, we were asked to turn it down and we will do that, but we're not going to do it for the protesters. How petty is that? Come on, guys, grow up. SP Crusader here saying, excellent, we shall bring our own pipers. The church will be happy. That would just be so great, wouldn't it? SP Chef is here. Thank you so much for joining, Sam. Hello, darlings. Finally managed alive. Hello and welcome. Obviously, Sam, you were there last year, so I think you're going to find this live stream particularly interesting. Now, another note regarding safety on the road that the council pulled Scientology up on was the fact that the security staff weren't wearing high-vis jackets. We as protesters were wearing high-vis jackets because, as I said, safety is our number one priority, but clearly not Scientology's. Will your staff or security teams commit to wearing high-vis labeled security or staff to allow identification at future events? The church's response was that this was duly noted and they would organise high-vis jackets for security staff for future events, adding the high-cost security would not be necessary if protesters were not present. So the church is saying that the high-vis jackets are adding additional security cost to the event, which we wouldn't have to do if it weren't for the protesters. Right. Scientology, I know you watch my videos, so Office of Special Affairs, here's your message. High-vis jackets are rather cheap. In fact, I got about 20 of them for I think it was about £10 on Amazon. And you know what? For the sake of public safety, I will donate 20 high-vis jackets to you if you so require them because you're concerned about the cost of keeping your staff safe. How's that for a negotiation, Scientology? I'll bring extras with me this year and you can help yourself if you don't provide them. But also, I think it's ridiculous that Scientology are using the excuse of cost as a reason not to provide high-vis jackets. This is an organization that literally spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on expensive advertising on the London Underground just to combat our 3 ads that said I'm an ex-Scientologist. This is an organization that spent hundreds of thousands of pounds trying to fight us and trying to shut us down as protesters. And an organization that this whole process cost the taxpayer £84,000, by the way. This is an organization with billions of dollars in the bank, and they're complaining about the additional cost of providing high-vis jackets to their security staff. Again, grow up, Scientology, grow up. All right, let's carry on. Another thing, umbrellas. Okay, guys, you may remember this from last year and the year before. The security staff had umbrellas, right? These big golf umbrellas that they had erected. It wasn't raining, but they had these umbrellas nonetheless. And it was pretty clear from being there in person that the reason these umbrellas were put out was to try and obstruct and obscure the view of protesters from those attending the event walking in and out of the premises. But here we have finally an actual admission from Scientology that that is the reason they used umbrellas. The church here advised the security company were instructed to use umbrellas to block protesters by the church. Here we go, in writing. Thank you very much. Again, Scientology resorting to petty things to try and obscure the view of protesters. What sort of church does this? But again, I find it highly entertaining that they admitted to it, and it is now published in a council document. Now, let's move on to the barriers. So this is just another thing that I found really funny. As well as blocking the pathway by placing people with umbrellas there and planters and so on, Scientology also put metal fences on the public right-of-way. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, there is a grass verge that runs along St. Hill Road that leads right up to the entrance of their property, and that's where we were standing as protesters. It's public land. They blocked the public land with planters. They then removed the planters. Then they blocked the public land with metal barriers. And so the council have asked whether Scientology would not do that. They said, would you please stop putting metal barriers on the public right of way? And Scientology's response was, Attendee 1 advised the public highway was blocked by the protesters and not the barriers, and they would use barriers at future events on the public highway as they want to protect the public. Attendee 7 noted the protesters stood immediately at the entrance to the church, claiming it is part of the public highway, hence the installation of planters in 2023. Well, again, that's completely twisting the truth. We stood on public land at all times. Police were there. We have never been able to stand right by the entrance because it is always blocked by Scientology. And I just think it's funny that they are saying these metal barriers do not block the public right of way, when they clearly do. The photos show a barrier along the verge. How can you argue that that isn't blocking the right of way? Protesters did not block the right of way, and that is evidenced by these documents that the council have supplied. All right, and now let's move on to event management. Now, this is another really interesting inside scoop here that Scientology have given us. We know that the IES event is organized at the whim of David Miscavige, the leader of the Church of Scientology. It's always a very last-minute affair. Only a couple of weeks before it happens, do we get the final go-ahead? Do we get the promotional materials? Do we get the date announced by the Church of Scientology? The reason it's left so last minute is because it depends on when David Miscavige finally says, yes, let's do it. Now, here, the council actually hear from Scientology why, what their reason is for the event date not being provided in advance. In the interests of crowd safety and to comply with the requirements of your premises license, because the premises license requires that you have to, the Scientology give advance warning of their events. Will you confirm that you will share your event management plan with a traffic management plan to Mid-Sussex District Council and Sussex Police not less than 6 weeks before any event? Attendee 1 and Attendee 7. By the way, this is Graham and Janet. Hi, Janet. Everybody say hi, Janet, in the chat. We love Janet. So Janet and Graham advised they share the event management plan and traffic management plan with Mid-Sussex District Council and the police in advance of any event every year. The council advised, however, that the council do not know far enough in advance of the event to be able to put a robust management plan in place and advise partners such as blue light services. Attendee 1, so the church, explained that because the IES is an international event, it is difficult to provide the exact date 6 weeks in advance due to the Los Angeles filming schedule. He said they are provided with 3 date options, which they provide to Mid-Sussex District Council as soon as they have them. The church prepare for the event to be held on any of those 3 dates provided. The council highlighted the difficulty of this on public services and resources to provide the appropriate safety measures. So I thought that was a little interesting information, interesting inside scoop on how it works. So Scientology International Management give Saint Hill 3 dates in October, which is when they can provide their IES event, and they don't get the final go ahead until a couple of weeks before, and that puts unnecessary stress and burden on council resources because the council need to know ahead of time. I just thought that was interesting. Are there any further or additional steps that you could take to reduce disruption, improve road safety during the event? Scientology advised they gave this great consideration in 2024 and also every year. Belatedly, they explored the idea of creating a safe space for visitors to the entrance. For example, a tunnel from the rugby club entrance to the main entrance. However, this would be a lot of trouble and expense for the church when there are only a small number of protesters. They discussed reinstallation of the planters as a good alternative. So Scientology are looking to build a tunnel underneath Saint Hill Road so that people can get from the rugby club to the Saint Hill property whilst avoiding protesters. Now, that's obviously going to require planning permission and it's going to take a long time to build, but it's something to look out for. And again, just goes to show how funny Scientology are, because they go to these ridiculous extents to try and avoid their parishioners seeing protesters. A tunnel. Matt just said here, oh my God, I've heard it all now. Yeah, exactly. Like, come on, guys, grow up. Like, we're not any danger. We're not any harm. We are just there with a message of kindness and compassion. And the council documents show that. We are not causing disruption to the local community. The disruption is caused by Scientology's event. Witness says, lol, a tunnel. Yeah, exactly. So they don't want to spend money on high-vis jackets, but they may spend money on building a tunnel. Where is the logic here? SP Chef says, hello, Janet, darling. Remember me? I used to give you extra food and you always got a cookie from me for Wednesday dinner. There we go. We love Janet. Hi, Janet. Okay, now let's look at something else here. This is the actual report from the council. So this is the report that's being presented to elected members on Monday. Now, it's again very lengthy, but this is the council's findings, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of key points. Here, where are we? Okay, here, talk about noise, nuisance, and filming. The church, this is the council here. The church cannot feasibly complain of being a victim of these behaviors when it authors a proportion of them itself, in particular, the playing of loud bagpipe music and filming of protesters and attendees. So what this is in reference to is Scientology were complaining about being the victim of noise, of people protesting outside, of hate speech, of harassment, of online live stream videos by myself. They were trying to play the victim card. The council here actually said the church cannot feasibly complain of being a victim of these behaviors when it authors a proportion of them itself. This is the council recognizing fair game. And this just goes to show the due diligence and the care and attention to detail that the council has gone through all of the evidence with. And I think it's huge that the council are calling Scientology out for this. Number 69, the church has submitted that the protesters engaged in serious harassment, causing alarm and distress to visitors. However, this is not supported by the detailed evidence reviewed in preparation of this report, in particular, the police witness statements regarding the IES 2023 event and police and council officers' observations of the 2024 IES event. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is our vindication as a protest group. There is no evidence anything we did was hateful, was discriminatory, was harassment. We engaged in a peaceful protest with kindness and compassion at the forefront of what we do. And this is the council saying that Scientology complained all of those things happened, this antisocial behavior, and the council have said there is no evidence of that whatsoever. So, well done, everybody. Let's continue with this method of protesting with kindness and compassion. It is so, so important. And again, It's another example of the council actually seeing through Scientology's lies and recognizing that we are a kind and compassionate bunch. Clay's Closet, thank you so much for the super chat. Love what you, Aaron, Mark, Claire do exposing the cult. And the LA people stopping the recruiters. Keep up the good work. It's so interesting learning about the cult over there. Love from Dallas. Thank you so much. I appreciate the super chat. If anyone else wants to support the channel, please consider using the Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal links in the description down below. Super chats are also a great way of supporting the channel, as well as subscribing and pressing that like button. Haggis Basher says, nice. Witness says, amazing job, Alex. You have Scientology spinning their wheels, trying to block all your legal actions. Precisely. It is legal. We've done nothing wrong. SP Crusader Leany says, we are lovely and are here to help. Precisely. Okay. And finally, this is just to give you an idea of the work that I've been doing behind the scenes, because I haven't been able to show a lot of these documents with you during this process, but now they're all public. I wanted to give you an example of what I've been doing and the emails that I've been writing. So, as many of you may know, because I posted it in the underground bunker and asked for people's opinions, on the 22nd of May, the council proposed that instead of implementing a protest ban, instead they implement a voluntary code of conduct. Now, the voluntary code of conduct was as follows. Whilst protesting on St Hill Road, protesters will comply and will follow and comply with any instructions given by police and or any officers of Mid-Sussex District Council or West Sussex County Council. At all times, protesters will remain in a space designated for their use in agreement with the police, other than for the reasonable purposes of entering and exiting that space. At all times, protesters will remain on public land or the public highway. In particular, they will not enter or attempt to enter the property of the church at any time. Protesters will not obstruct or attempt to obstruct any persons from entering church premises. Protesters will not attempt to harass, intimidate, or abuse any persons or people providing security, and so on. Protesters will not display images, text, banners, placards, posters, or similar, which include foul or abusive language, or images which actually depict or which might reasonably be considered to depict members or leaders of the church. Protesters will not play or use amplified music, voice, or audio. Protesters will not film or photograph people entering the church. Protesters will not approach people entering the church with leaflets, and protesters will display this voluntary code of conduct. So that is what the council proposed. I asked for your feedback, and I can finally now share with you the email that I sent in response. Now, the result of this email is that the code of conduct was amended, and it now is a lot shorter, and it basically just says that we'll follow the law, we'll follow instructions given by the police, and that's it. They've taken out all the concerns about filming people. They've taken out things about the placards because of our freedom of speech, which is protected by the European Commission on Human Rights. And ultimately, the voluntary code of conduct is voluntary. So all of these concerns have now been sorted. But I wanted to share with you the response that I wrote to this email, because it is written on behalf of you guys, on behalf of other protesters, and it was done so with the feedback of people in this community. And I wasn't able to share this with you because all of this evidence was not shared with both sides during this process. It's not the same as a court battle where both sides get to see all the evidence. It is all done in confidence, and the council are the ones that make the decision. And after that fact, the evidence is then shared with both sides, which is why I now have all of Scientology's arguments. So I didn't want to give away our position. I didn't want to give away the arguments that I was making prior to the decision being made. I can now share it with you, and I'm going to read the email. It is quite lengthy, so I hope you guys are strapped in, because I think it's important. I just want to give you an example of how I've been fighting this case over the last 10 months. So this email was sent on the 29th of May. Again, this process has been ongoing for 10 months, and this is just one of many emails that were sent. Dear Lucy Corrie, let me take a swig of my Diet Coke. Thank you for your letter dated 22nd of May regarding a proposed voluntary code of conduct for protesters in response to Scientology's application for a PSPO. As the organizer of the two protests that took place in 2023 and 2024, I would like to stress that great care is taken to ensure our demonstrations go ahead both peacefully and safely, and do not cause disruption to local residents or those wishing to attend Scientology's annual IES anniversary event. As you mentioned, we already have a code of conduct on the protest website that lays out clear rules and expectations for those wishing to participate in our demonstration. We also liaise with Sussex Police before, during, and after any protest to ensure that our actions do not result in any antisocial behaviour, harassment, or intimidation. At both protests, no arrests, cautions, or warnings were issued, and there is no evidence to suggest that the police have found it necessary to restrict our rights or limit our protest activity in the past. It is also not possible for us to situate ourselves on the eastern side of St Hill Road, opposite the entrance to Scientology's property, due to a fence, hedging, and wooden sleepers the hedge have installed on public land, which West Sussex Highways have ordered to be removed. We have also attempted to engage in meaningful dialogue with the Church of Scientology to make arrangements that ensure our protests do not disrupt their event, but have never been afforded a response. We would be more than happy to negotiate and liaise with all parties concerned and amend our existing code of conduct in a way that is mutually agreeable. However, in its current form, your suggested voluntary code raises several significant concerns for us as a community. Firstly, I'd like to seek further clarity on the legal implications of entering into such an agreement. Who is responsible for overseeing its implementation, and what are the repercussions for either party should there be any breaches? At present, the police have sufficient powers with which they can restrict protest activity and take action against harassment and antisocial behaviour. Through our liaison prior to the event, it was agreed in both years that the sergeant on duty each day will make an assessment as to the safest place for us to protest. The verge to the south of Scientology's entrance was identified as the most appropriate due to the space it affords us to stand with our signs, be seen by passers-by, and also allow members of the public to access the property without having to walk in the road. At no point have the police indicated our location needs to be designated prior to the day itself, and our freedom of assembly is protected under Article 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights. In order for restrictions to be placed on protests in the United Kingdom, the Police, Crime Sentencing and Courts Act 2022, the PCSC Act, says that an officer must reasonably believe that a protest may cause serious public disorder, serious damage to property, serious disruption to the life of the community, that noise generated by the protest may lead to serious disruption or have relevant impact on people in the area, and/or that the purpose of the protest is to intimidate others. In both 2023 and 24, there is no evidence to suggest our demonstration met any of these criteria, and the police have not found it necessary to restrict our rights in any way as a result. Although we would be more than happy to agree to comply with any instructions given by the police and/or council officers, we are already required to do so under existing legislation, and so it's unclear why an additional voluntary code of conduct would be necessary to ensure any future protests remain lawful. I am also happy to agree to remain on public land and do not enter or attempt to enter Scientology's property at any time. However, I feel it is important to note that although we all share a common goal, we are not an organised or incorporated group, and so individuals taking part in protests must be held responsible for their own actions. Implementing a voluntary code of conduct raises concerns over enforceability. Although I have been given the mandate to represent the views of protesters in attendance last year and in 2023, I do not have the authority to enter into an agreement on the behalf of any and all individuals who may wish to organise their own protests at St Hill in the future, and so I am concerned that this code may impact the rights of others who I do not represent and who do not consider themselves part of our community. Similarly, those who do not wish to agree to the voluntary code of conduct may engage in demonstrations that do not align with our values as a group, and as such, I am concerned their behaviour may be used as an example of a breach, leading to potential reason to further restrict our rights. The police have sufficient powers to ensure any and all protest activity remains lawful, and it is unclear whether a voluntary code of conduct would result in further complications should there be any antisocial behaviour in the future that is not connected with me or our community. With regard to obstructing or attempting to obstruct and/or harassing, intimidating, or abusing any persons entering the church premises, our website makes it clear that this is something we would not tolerate and have never engaged in historically. Any individuals found to be doing or intending to do so would be asked to leave and immediately reported to the police. I would like to seek clarity on point 6, which states protesters will not display images, text, banners, placards, protesters, or similar, blah, blah, blah. I've already read that point. Under Section 5 of the Public Order Act 1986, it is an offence to say things that are threatening, abusive, or insulting, or to behave in a threatening, abusive, insulting, or disorderly manner. It is also an offence to display any sign that is threatening, abusive, or insulting. Although signage displayed at protests may be deemed offensive to some, Article 10 on the Human Rights Act 1998 protects our expression and right to communicate in any medium, including through words, pictures, and actions. Our message is one of kindness and compassion, and our signage has consistently avoided foul or abusive language. Agreeing to this would arguably fall under the first point that we will comply with the law and any requests made by the police, and so it is unclear to me why it's necessary to add an additional clause specifically around signage. On images that depict members or leaders of the church, I take issue with the idea that we as protesters would be restricted from doing so, while Scientology continue to use our images on their websites and social media channels in order to characterize us as criminals and anti-religious bigots. For example, since organizing the first protest in 2023, the Church of Scientology have used my picture to create offensive memes, articles, and social media posts across their various channels in a deliberate attempt to harass and discredit me as an activist. My business associates have received letters from Scientology under the guise of their Freedom magazine, which describe me as a promoter of hate speech. And just last weekend, they published an article attacking one of my previous workplaces, suggesting my employment is not just inappropriate, it's potentially a public safety risk. In the last few months alone, I've received over 10,000 attack tweets, many of which use highly edited photos of me with captions such as "Stalker bigot Barnes Ross made himself unemployable," "Forlorn, pitifully sad and abandoned or lonely," "No morals and no principles," "Serial stalker," "Disgrace," and "Stalker Barnes Ross was erased by his own mum." In contrast, our signage carries messages such as "When was the last time you saw your family? They love you, and so do we." "Abuse in Scientology must end. We're here to help." And "It's not out ethics to put your mental health first." In reference to the elf doll, no complaints were made when it was displayed during our protest in 2023, and it is only in response to the ongoing PSPO process that Scientology complained about it in 2024. It features in photographs published in the national press, which would not have been allowed if it were deemed likely to cause offence, and in order to avoid any potential conflicts arising, we agreed to remove the doll in 2024. However, evidence has yet to be supplied to us that it genuinely caused alarm or distress, and it is my belief that it is just one example of an artificial confrontation manufactured in order to cause concerns over our behaviour. David Miscavige, the leader of the Church of Scientology, which the church argues the doll represents, is not revered as a holy figure within their religion, and there is nothing in Scientology scripture which suggests showing his likeness would cause genuine distress. In fact, Miscavige is referred to as chairman of the board, a corporate sounding role, and his picture is routinely shared on Scientology's publications and online. Similarly, on the FAQs portion of their own website, on whether their founder L. Ron Hubbard is worshipped, it says no. L. Ron Hubbard personally stated that he was a man as others are men. He was a much loved friend and teacher and continues to be respected and loved. On point 7, protesters will not play or use amplified music, voice, or audio. This could be seen as a disproportionate restriction on our freedom of expression, and I would argue is unfairly balanced in Scientology's favor when compared to their corresponding code of conduct, which permits the church use of amplified music, voice, or audio at designated times agreed in advance with the council and the police. In both 23 and 24, Scientology placed large loudspeakers on their property, aimed directly at protesters, that played a short and repetitive playlist of bagpipe music and at an unreasonably loud volume. This not only caused disturbance to local residents, but had the effect of drowning out protesters in an attempt to silence us. Existing legislation allows the police to restrict the use of loudspeakers and other forms of amplification in the event that it breaches the peace or causes disruption, and I fail to see how including this clause in a voluntary code of conduct would result in any change to Scientology's behaviour. I am more than happy to mitigate any potential noise disturbances caused by our process through liaison with the local authority, residents, and the church, but I will not agree to a measure that could inadvertently result in our voices being silenced due to Scientology's outdoor speaker system. Point 8 states that protesters will not film or photograph any person entering or exiting the church premises, and this has been the source of great concern in our community. Members of the public do not need permission to film or photograph in a public place, and according to the British Film Commission, you do not need to ask passers-by for permission to feature their faces in a film. Our protest activity is often being recorded and live streamed as a way of promoting our message to a wider audience, but also for our safety and in order to document our behaviour and the response we have received from Scientology. We fully respect people's rights to attend religious worship ceremonies in private, and as such, we have never organised a protest that coincides with Scientology's Sunday services or other such occasions. The IES event is the largest fundraising event in Scientology's calendar and does not involve anything they argue is an act of worship, such as group auditing or processing. It is open to Scientologists and non-Scientologists to attend, and there is no way for us to differentiate between those who choose to follow Scientology's teachings and those who do not when protesting outside St. Hill. We would be happy to commit to not intentionally singling out those who enter or leave the property by zooming in on their faces. However, by recording our event, which takes place on public land, we cannot guarantee that attendees will not be captured on camera incidentally or in the background of the footage. I'm just starring some comments here. Witness says, great point made there, Alex. Well done. Thank you. She also says, yep, the fair game. Miscavige has it going for sure. And SP Chef is saying, very well written, Alex. It has all the details and well put arguments. Thank you so much, Sam. I tried my best. At both protests, Scientology had a number of agents armed with camera equipment pointed directly at us. They have the same right to do this as we do, and we do not have any objection to them doing so. Similarly, a number of CCTV cameras along the perimeter of their property are aimed at the areas in which protesters stand, and one camera is permanently aimed at the road and captures any and all traffic that passes by on St. Hill Road. Although Scientology's corresponding voluntary code stipulates that the church shall not film or photograph protesters who remain within the space, this would require them to remove or cover their CCTV cameras, and there is no guarantee they would not capture footage of us arriving or leaving the designated area. The footage we captured in both 23 and 24 was supplied as evidence for Mid-Sussex District Council to consider as part of this PSPO process, and has served as a valuable resource for law enforcement and the local authority to review our actions and Scientology's response. Due to the previous aggressive behaviour on the part of the church, for example, in 23, a protester was shoved into the road in front of moving traffic, and the history of false accusations made against us, we feel it is necessary for our own safety and security to film our activities, and as a result, those entering and or leaving the St. Hill property will inadvertently be captured on camera. We have always displayed signage stating that we are live streaming on YouTube, and the numerous media outlets who have reported on our protest demonstrates there is a valid and significant public interest in Scientology's event and our protest. There are multiple entrances to the St. Hill property, and those who see our sign and do not wish to be caught on camera are able to avoid the protest entirely by using an alternative gate or using the grass verge to walk behind us. The police have not suggested any of the footage captured by protesters amounts to an invasion of privacy, harassment, or intimidation. I consider it would be a restriction on our rights to stipulate that what we can and cannot film, and would add unnecessary burden on both sides to enforce. After the IES event, Scientology puts out a press release every year and publishes numerous photographs of those attending their event, which clearly shows the faces of every person in attendance. It also displays a notice at events that states Scientology Media Productions will be filming in this area today. I'm not going to read the full statement here because it's quite lengthy, but essentially it says you give us permission to film you. And so restricting our right to film would be unbalanced and result in Scientology being the sole entity permitted to capture the event, setting a dangerous precedent in the context of media bias and controlling the narrative. Witness says, interesting that Scientology does not want to film, considering they recorded all Tom Cruise auditing sessions and Miscavige watches them. Exactly. Heidi says, how much longer can this cult survive? Won't it end once all the old timers are gone? Very valid point. It's very possible. It is also important to us that the event and our protest is documented and broadcast. as it sends an important signal to those we seek to help that there are thousands of people watching who are prepared to support anybody who wishes to leave Scientology. As I mentioned, I've been the target of a prolific campaign of harassment as a result of speaking out about the abuse I suffered in the church, and their policies require Scientologists to actively attack and intimidate those it perceives as enemies. Scientology have systematically weaponized the internet in an attempt to silence dissent, censor free speech, and scrub any record of our protests taking place. And so it is vitally important we retain the right to document our activities and Scientology's response to them on the day. I'm also concerned about the clause that would prevent protesters from approaching persons entering or exiting church premises with leaflets or similar. Scientology retain tight control over the lives of its members, particularly those who work at St. Hill. These staff members in particular are part of the Sea Organisation, and they have signed $1 billion-year contracts dedicating their lives and all future lives to working for the church. They are provided communal accommodation in Crowborough and are often expected to work 14 to 18-hour days, 7 days a week with no time off, and in return for a weekly stipend of just £50. With the exception of a limited number of public-facing executives, for the most part, SEAL staff are not permitted to own mobile phones, and any access to the internet is closely monitored and heavily censored. They are required to seek permission before leaving the property and are not allowed to do so unaccompanied, and as a result, any contact with the outside world is incredibly limited. Our main goal with protesting Scientology's abusive practices is to raise awareness of the community and support that exists for these Sea Org staff, should they choose to leave. And as such, leaflets and signage is an incredible part of our campaign. Any material we have distributed at protests has offered a message of compassion and has directed people to contact the Michael J. Rinder Aftermath Foundation, a non-profit set up to support people in landing on their feet after leaving Scientology. Often a flyer or a card is the only way to reach people stuck at St. Hill, and there have been a notable increase in calls made to the Foundation's helpline as a result of our protests and card distribution. As with our signage, we would be happy to agree to ensuring any printed materials do not contain malicious communications, religious hate speech, or abusive language, but I would like to stress the importance of distributing information about the support and mental health services available to those visiting St. Hill and the local area. The decision on whether any signage, printed materials, or imagery is offensive should be made by the courts, and I worry that the voluntary code of conduct may circumvent the judicial system's autonomy over such matters. Haggis Basher says, I went and had a bath and you're still reading the letter. You are correct, it was a long one. Yeah, I did tell you, it is a long one. But I wanted to read it out. I'm almost at the end now. But I wanted to give you guys an idea of how hard I've been fighting this thing. In order for such a code of conduct to be meaningful, it would need to specify exactly how it will be enforced, the repercussions for not abiding by its rules, and what implications it may have on all parties concerned. It is my view that Scientology's request for a PSPO has placed an unnecessary burden on limited council resources, and I'm concerned that the council implementing a code of conduct would invite future complaints that would need to be assessed and reviewed by the council, which comes at a cost to the taxpayer. The church has already demonstrated its willingness to interfere with protesters' activities by obstructing the public right-of-way with planters and barriers on the western side of St. Hill Road, and with an unauthorised fence and hedgerow planted opposite their entrance on the eastern side. Similarly, last year, Mid-Sussex District Council issued Scientology with a planning contravention notice for the unauthorised construction of a 4,000 square metre marquee that is used as the venue for their event. This demonstrates a consistent lack of respect for the local area and its laws. My worry is that although they may agree to a voluntary code of conduct, it would only be weaponized to be used against us. Given Scientology's flagrant disregard for safety, highways laws, and planning regulations, there is precedent to suggest they would also not abide by any code of conduct issued by the council. The church has consistently acted in bad faith throughout this process, and its own policy states that we as protesters have no rights of any kind and may be deprived of property or injured by any means by any Scientologist without discipline of the Scientologist, may be tricked, sued, lied to, or destroyed. I fundamentally object to any proposal that would require us to forfeit our rights of my I fundamentally object to any proposal that would require us to forfeit rights to my abusers, especially considering they are actively seeking to destroy me by any means necessary. Nonetheless, we agree that communication can be a universal solvent. Do you like that little reference I got in there? I had to throw that in there. And remain open and willing to have meaningful dialogue with the church and the council. There have only been 2 protests in the last 6 years, and although there is no guarantee there will be any in the future, we are committed to working together in order to ensure that if they do not result in antisocial behaviour or persistent ongoing disruption to the local community. In summary, as you mentioned, we already have a code of conduct in place on our website, and we are open to making an informal agreement or amendments to our existing guidelines in order to address any concerns the council may have. However, we must be careful not to place unnecessary sanctions or restrictions on our basic human rights. And there's the the references to Scientology policy as well. So that is just one example of an email that I sent as part of this process, and that email resulted in the council reviewing and altering, amending the voluntary code of conduct, and ultimately this negotiation led to the council recommending that a protest ban is not necessary. The final decision will be made on Monday, but I just wanted to share this with you to give you an idea of the sort of work I've been doing behind the scenes that I haven't been able to share with you over the last few months. Heidi says, question, do members actually live at St. Hill? If so, does that qualify as human trafficking? They don't. They live in Crowborough, which is where the communal birthing is provided for Sea Org members. As for human trafficking, absolutely. Scientology is a human trafficking abusive organization. If you sign a Sea Org contract, you may be moved to any property at any time by church management, even if that means you won't be near your family or even your husband or wife. Families can be torn apart by Scientology's oppressive policies, such as moving people around and fair game as well, and disconnection. Matt says, all this is just ARC break between protesters and Scientology. Yes, and I would suggest if Scientology are that upset by our protest, perhaps they should go and do some auditing, which is supposed to clear up any issues such as, confusion or upset or distress. Those things are things that Scientology claim to be able to resolve through the process of auditing, and I would invite Scientologists to go and spend more of their money at the church to try and get these services, to try and overcome their reaction to our protests, which are peaceful, kind, compassionate, that the council have found are peaceful, that the police have found are not offensive. And so if a Scientologist is offended by it, well, that's a problem for you, not a problem for us. And we will continue protesting in a peaceful manner as and when the time is right. Witness says, amazing, Alex. Your letter writing skills rivals Doug Boudin. Thank you. I don't know who that is, but thank you. Haggis Bachelor says, Lara and Reese are 2 very good examples of child human trafficking by Scientology. Precisely. So, guys, look. That's it from me for now. I'm not going to be on YouTube for a little while because I'm going to be away working at a festival for the next couple of weeks. I will try and get a live stream in if I can on Monday, because that is when the decision will be made by the council. I will be there in person. If you want to be there yourself, you have to register in advance. Please go on the Mid-Sussex District Council website and register your attendance. We won't be given the opportunity to speak, but we can witness the proceedings. I will go live, and that is when the decision will actually be made, and the protest ban will not be going ahead. I've had a lot of press interest already, so there's going to be a lot of news articles coming out over the next week or so, I expect. So keep your eyes peeled for those, and I'll try and go live as and when I can. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody's support throughout this process. Thank you to those of you who donated through Buy Me a Coffee. This process hasn't been cheap. This process has been very cumbersome on my mental health. It has been a very big challenge that we have faced, and I'm glad that the council have finally seen that we have a right to protest, that we have a freedom of speech here in the UK, and we're almost at the end. There's a final hurdle that we need to get over on Monday, but if you want to support this channel, support this activism, please consider buying me a coffee. Otherwise, please press that like button, press subscribe. I also have a blog, Scientologybusiness.com, that you can subscribe to for free. You get regular updates of what's going on in the world of Scientology activism here in the UK. And thank you to those of you who have shared, commented, all of that sort of stuff. That is what has really helped inform me on how I need to approach this. And I've used all of your feedback as a community in preparing my responses. If you want to read more of the responses, the whole 500 pages is available on the Mid-Sussex District Council website. I've put the link in the description if you want to go through it all. It is an interesting read if you've got the time. But if not, I will be doing more updates like this and more summaries of their arguments. But major win for us. Thank you so much, guys. Stay tuned, and I'll see you all on the next one.